Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is Crystal One-on-One time. Thank you for joining us. We happen to be at the Kibo Lounge at Machame Health Club in Naguru. Great place. Make sure you pass by. And today I'm chatting with a content creator, a media personality, an activist, feminist, so many different things, an actress too. I have Faith Mulunji from Radio City joining me. Hello.
Hi, Crystal.
So radio host as well, eh?
Everything at this point.
Everything. How are you?
I am well. I will start with a disclaimer. I feel like this is going to be like us catching up, but on camera.
Okay.
So please forgive.
I'm going to try to make sure we don't leave you out too much because there's a lot.
Yes.
It's
Thank
so
you so
nice
much
to
for
see
having
you.
me, though. So nice to be here finally.
I had plans for you for a minute, especially when I started saying, now she's acting on stage in theater. My gosh, when did that start? I'm sorry, I have to start.
You have to start
from the end. I'll start there.
Okay, so growing up, I'd always been on the stage.
Okay.
Always. Speech days, what, MDD, into A-level, even at campus, would script.
Okay.
Would like script, come up with plays. My head is a very interesting space to be. So that sort of
What does that
died.
mean?
Like, I could write things.
Okay.
I was one of those kids that would just write down stuff. You write a play, you write something, a movie in your head, then you just write it, and then it dies there. Because you know how our education system goes. So when the chance presented itself for me to be part of a mentorship club, I was like, I don't really have anything on my hands. I remember I'd quit work in 2020, radio, and then, so I was free.
Okay.
I was free to do a lot of things. So
are you one of those people you quit and you are like, let me just take some me time? Let me see what happens? Or did you already have something working in the background?
Crystal, this is going to be long. But actually, no. I'd always been those certainty people. But you see, when you are, I think something happened to me when I clocked 30.
Okay.
And I remember at 29 being at Power FM, and I just kept on asking myself, there has to be more, there has to be more. So I decided when I clocked, when I clocked 30, I'm like, I really need a break.
Okay.
And then my health was also not in a very good space. So I had a year of just to rest.
Okay.
Then last year, we'll probably talk about it a little later, had surgery, and so I needed some more rest. And when this year began, I really didn't have plans. So when I saw the poster, I was like, Zion Kente, the lady that plays Crystal in, what's it called, in Sanyu. So we were chatting and I was telling her, I really would like to venture into, theater or acting. And so she hooked me up with that opportunity. So I took it up. And why I usually like to laugh at people who see my social media is I usually announce when things are done. So I get onto this program for 3 months and we have school plays.
Okay.
So we just go into schools, play for children at the theater, help them interpret literature, the literature plays, Merchant of Venice and all that stuff.
Yes.
So by the time it gets out, I was already in 3 months. Yes.
But for most of us, we were like, what?
And so finally, the team I did the mentorship program with comes up and they said, there is this character and we know you're going to nail it. So they take me through, the book is called Still a Mom, and it's about a couple that waits 15 years to get a child.
Yes.
So as someone that lives with endometriosis, stage 4, I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's raise awareness. And it was in theater last month.
It kind of sounds like things kind of fell in place as well.
To be honest,
timing is everything in life.
Yes.
You can't rush some things, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Now you see, I've jumped so far ahead.
It's okay.
I apologize. Can we go back?
Can we go back now? Yes.
You mentioned in school you were always that child.
Yes.
With a mic on stage. Where did you grow up and where did it all start?
So I am born to 2 teachers. Yes.
And you've never gotten anything, no bug?
I'm born to 2 teachers and I was an only child for a bit.
Okay.
but I grew up around adults. So my parents say I started talking at 1.5 years. And they say I kept on telling them I wanted to go to school.
So you were bored at home?
They would
Or is it
carry
because
me,
you wanted other
ironically.
children, maybe?
They would carry me along. I think my fuzzy memories of childhood was, they used to call it echibaya. It used to be woven.
So they would
Yes,
take you with
they
them
would.
to school.
Yes, my mom would take me everywhere. My parents owned a school, and so they said that one of the first things I said was, I want to go to school. So they enrolled me. Remember that time in the 90s, you'd have baby class, middle class, and top class. So I reached top class, and I'm still way below 5.
Oh.
So my parents are like, let her repeat. Because they were scared. Where
So
were
you
they
were
going
too
to
young
take
to go into primary?
Yes.
Okay.
I've always loved to sing. I've always loved to read. While sometimes when Daddy was being the headmaster, there were books. So I would always just hide in the corner, sit and read.
And you were in heaven.
Yes. Funny how I was a quiet child growing up. And I would ask lots of questions, though. So my parents were a bit scared that that would be beaten out of me.
Yeah.
Because I would always want to know why
Very
things
curious child. And you always had an opinion also.
Thank you. So they say I would keep quiet and observe. And then later on, I would ask them. So at 8, my parents separated. And that, my father believes, took a toll on me. So I birthed a loud persona.
Okay. So there was a switch in your
There
personality.
was a switch. But remember, I loved music. So on the stage, I went to a couple of schools that don't exist anymore.
Okay.
Still beefing a certain mall.
That took over a certain school. I know that one.
But before that was Omega Nursery and Primary School, which was along Mawanda Road. It was one of the best then because it had a band, and I joined the brass band. Yes, as very tiny, as tiny. I had round cheeks and I didn't have the quality of the hair. Man, Crystal, I've evolved. It was so bad.
Well, how can you remember your hair back
My
then?
parents
Really?
tried to document a lot of things. And I also
Okay.
remember having to cut it when I was younger because plaiting it was painful and plating was painful. So, yes. So I joined the brass band, played the side drums. They call the tenor drums. Played the cymbals. Music all through. But I also, partly from my dad's side, we're quite musical. I have an uncle who lives and breathes music, but he was in theater. Yeah. So that's where it all began. My parents never missed a single speech day. Not once, not twice. But then we go to high school, and there was no provision for speech day. There was Interact. But then, by then, I'd gotten saved. So it was a bit tricky. I was those students who, you'd go and want to have fun and interact, but then you're in scripture union. So you had to sit through the sermons of, if you're neither hot or cold, the Lord will spit you out.
All right. So even at that age, you knew there were so many things you couldn't do. So it wasn't a very liberal.
No. Growing up as a teacher's child, that meant you belong. I grew up in an area where you belong to the community. If Christo found you doing something, they would beat you.
Yes, your reflection.
And they would not stop there. They would tell the parents, so that would be like double beating. Because you're a role model's child.
People saying we should go back to those days.
But they can, please, dear. I think it has its pros and cons. So I grew up, a lot of my life was, you're supposed to walk the straight and narrow. Your parents are known in the public. Just, you stand out like a sore thumb.
Not embarrass them.
Then I get saved. I was enrolled into Compassion when I was really young, at around 7 or 8. And then leadership always stresses me. Oh, I forgot to mention I'm a firstborn. So it's always been living life exemplary for other people and all. So not as liberal. And then fully plunged into church. Proper church.
From that age?
From 8.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
that really determined the things
a lot
that
of
you
things
do.
that some I don't do anymore. But yes, that sort of shaped my worldview for the longest time. To be honest, my life is a miracle. because when I was in primary school, my parents, we went through a very rough time. They lost everything. Remember, they had separated.
Yes.
Then we lost everything. So I was supposed to go to Gayaza High School for my O levels, and by that time, I remember sitting home for close to 2 months.
Okay.
So one day, my dad is walking around the neighborhood, and the director of Omega, asks him. We were friends with the daughter. I have that thing with people though. Like, I don't know, I guess I connect with people easily. So she had saved a bed for me, and there were no phones. Okay, there were phones then, but they were not as available. So he told my dad, Anna Chitiwa is her name. I hope she's still alive because I will forever remember her. So he asks daddy, where is the girl, and daddy explains. So this man gets money out of his pocket and tells my dad, I need you to pass by office next week and get more. We need that girl back in school.
Bless.
So that's how I go to high school. So I enrolled where Safe Border is now.
Okay.
The school was called
That's where it was?
City View High School. That's what we could afford
Okay.
then. So I enroll, and things were so bad we moved to Katanga.
Okay.
A very renowned slum. So we had to stay there and had to squeeze into a single room. I come from a family of many siblings.
Okay.
So we had to squeeze into that room. And while there, I had to learn to make things work. So I would wash clothes. We cooked food for Makere students to make things work.
Yeah.
So that one
You
year...
were still with your dad at this time?
Yes, and my stepmom.
Okay.
Yes, because we had to move in together. We had to
Right.
find a way of making things work. So while there, school, City View, they start up this bursary scheme that had never existed. And that third term, senior one, I was among the top 5.
Okay.
So I got the bursary. So now that took the pressure of school fees off of me. Compassion would contribute partially, and then my parents, we didn't have to pay anything. So that meant that the money I was making from the laundry and all these other things
help the family?
would now help the family. We went through a very, very tough time, Crystal, because at some point we would fail to pay our rent because my parents were out of work. And we were really trying to make things work. And at some point, the landlady came and she broke half of the house. Yeah, she just broke like half of it because we were not able to pay. So whenever it would rain, we would put basins and saucepans there. But we were alive and we were able to go to school. So that went on up until my senior 4 vacation. We're able to raise some money and move somewhere else, still within. It was just moving from one place to another. Then I had a friend of mine. We're still friends to date. She's called Winnie. She's like, we need to change scenarios. We need to change schools because there is a joke of you can't be born and raised in Cheva and Okalere and study here and marry here and die here. So we were like, how about we change schools? Me knowing the situation, I was like, okay. So we go to Kololo SS. Now, the first encounter I had with a secretary was really crazy. She seemed mean. So my dad and I are really, really close because when mommy left, he raised us for some time.
Yeah.
So we go to school and I warn him. I'm like, Panangela, secretary is so mean. If you ever find me with my dad, you can think. I remember at campus, people used to think he was like my sugar daddy.
No.
We sit and talk for hours. So while we enter, our turn reaches. We're conversing the whole time. And then this lady kneels down and she greets my dad in Lusoga, Sangaido Kubona Uncle. I'm like, sis, I'd just given my dad a whole play out about how you are mean. Sis, what are you doing? So it turns out she was my cousin.
Oh.
So daddy goes into, I must confess, I'm the absentee cousin. So he goes through the whole, scenario. And for once, I thank God for nepotism, because that's how I was able to go through. Would be able to pay money as and when it came in, because Kate was there. So senior 6 vacation comes, we're still living, you know, in Mwandegea, but at a slightly, you know, much better space. If you went to school with me, I had no nails because the detergent had burnt most of my nails, and then at some point I got an injury on my back.
You were selling food as well?
Yes, my mom is an amazing cook. So she's like, how about you come and sell food in Box, Mary Stewart?
Okay.
So that's what we started doing from like senior 1 up until senior 5. Then it was banned. Like they didn't allow anyone to bring in food. Remember, that was around the same time they banned borders inside campus and taxis.
Yes.
So we had to find a way of making things work. So that's how I went to school, senior 5, senior 6. Senior 6, I really wanted to be a lot of things. I wanted to do cosmetology, I wanted to do geology, I wanted to do meteorology. And then my grades were really good. So zeroing down was such a hassle. But then zeroing down to go where? With what money? Enter another miracle. Compassion comes in and they're like, oh, we have a leadership development program that you're going to apply for. And when you go through interviews, then we'll probably are going to take on 100 students. Sis applied. By this time, I was working as volunteering at a church I was attending that time. So I had a bit of experience. So we applied, and I was among the 100. So I was able to go to campus, do 2 degrees concurrently.
Wow.
Yeah. Everything was paid. Hostel, the second degree, it was Christian leadership with John C. Maxwell, and then my dad convinced me to do social sciences because everything I wanted was out of the range that, yeah. So I ended up doing social sciences
and this leadership.
And leadership, yes. I majored in political, you see, me forgetting my course, political administration, and then social admin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my life is a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a blessing.
Yes, it is.
Now, you
Yeah.
talked about the toll your body took because of these things you were doing, and you were really young.
Yes.
And even when you say walking from school and back home, do you remember how heavy our bags were back then? Like, that was just not right.
Right. The bags were way bigger than
Yes, we're just like a little person, and it's
Can we talk about how
As in, I felt like you could
predatory-
like fall.
Yes, how predatory that was, because I would have to pass by Kubidi every single day. Those men that were, making beds and all, from the comments, from the countdown. But also sometimes you just wanted to be that child that does not repeat a white shirt, or that doesn't have to go to Owino to look for a cheaper alternative, or you don't have to be the one wearing the same shoes every time and, they start siding with the road. All of that takes a toll on your confidence. But amazing how sometimes I feel like the confidence I had then and the one now, there's sort of like a disconnect. So I'm like, I used to be, I don't know what has happened.
That's very interesting. Oh my. So you mentioned how that sometimes you didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Especially as a young girl, roaming around doing all these things in a slum.
I have known what it is to have and be in plenty, and I've known what it's like for everyone to look at you, for where you stay to be an example, a bad example in class. If you don't study, you're going to end up in Katanga. You're like, sir.
Wow.
But we move.
Sometimes ignorance, the things that people,
Yes.
we say that
Yes.
come out of our, oh wow.
So I think for me it was the motivation as well. I'd always, like I said, I wanted to be a lot of things. But at the end of the day, I've always wanted to be someone. I've always wanted to live a comfortable life. And so regardless of the things that life threw at me then and the pain, I don't know, like at the back of my mind, also looking around and seeing the stereotype. Even before I knew the word, I kept on telling my dad, we're going to get out of this place. We're going to get out of this place. And sometimes he would look at me and say, Bambi. And then you go to this church where like majority of the people are so rich. Meanwhile, to give you context, I used to wash clothes for university students.
Okay.
And majority were boys. So you can understand how crazy a lot of, a lot of the interaction was. But there are a couple that would stand up for you and say, kana katom kaleke. But then there would another one who would count down and say, because you said, just this much. But it was in that space of, I really want, like, I kept on saying, I've grown up in Katanga, but I want to tell this story without anyone detecting any bit of Katanga in me. And my dad would ask me, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know, but yeah. So I guess it paid off. I'm not where I want to be, but I guess it paid off. Those 7 or so years, I guess it paid off.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a very rough time in life.
It was.
And you had to grow up so fast.
Yeah.
So fast. And that was an unsafe environment. Is it the Aman Foundation?
Amani. Amani was, yes, born from a personal experience. At 19, I was raped. So when my parents...
Did you speak about it when it happened?
Way later.
So you never talked to anyone?
Way later. I didn't even... Like, I understood what had happened to me, but I kept on asking myself whether I didn't bring it upon myself, whether it actually was, those questions. Because a lot of times we are told to stay safe. We're told to do whatever we can, cover your skin, don't show this, don't stay, with a man alone in this space, don't. So I had mentally, I remember first checking whether I had not brought this upon myself. So,
mentally checking what you had done wrong.
How I had put myself in that position
situation
to ask for whatever had happened. But later on, I sort of understood, but then there still were not so many answers. I began talking about this. I remember I first shared this experience on radio. During Easter, there is something that Power FM does called Easter in Prison. So we would share the things that we've had to go through. And I remember my co-host then, Big Tim, I remember actually first tweeting it and pressing send. And it felt like a relief. It felt like a relief because it went on for some time. It wasn't a one-off. I may not go into details. At least nowadays I know how to say I'm not. So Amani was birthed from a place where I realized majority of the women I was encountering or getting to had an experience like mine.
Okay.
Or 2 or 3. And I realized that using my platform, or you can, one, raise awareness about it, but also to just be the support that wasn't there in my time. Because when you see how church treats, they will tell you, I remember going for a camp and this preacher took around tissue. I don't remember that tissue, but I remember they were serviettes. So they took tissue. They took it around, and there were 2. So the first one was supposed to treat it as delicately as we could. The second was supposed to trample on it and do whatever we wanted, and then return them to him. Okay. So in that exercise, he tells us, you see this one, the trampled on. This is what happens when you have sex. When you have sex, you become, you're this, you're that, you're that, you're that. You see this, that one that was, this is when you don't have sex. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, I hear you, but I was introduced to this in a very flimsy way by someone who I was supposed to feel safe with. Where do we go from here?
Someone you trusted, someone...
And I remember having to talk to them afterwards because there were those sessions. And this man told me, you have to confess the sin of fornication because at some point you stopped fighting and you enjoyed it. And I internalized that for a bit, but it didn't feel fair because everyone would want their first time to be amazing. But also if this is a continuous thing, but with the power dynamics of where someone that is supposed to keep you safe is the one preying on you.
I'm sorry.
Then it gets crazy.
I might need to ask a little bit more just for other people to understand some of these unsafe environments.
Yes.
Was this like an employer or a relative?
Let's call them that.
A relative.
Let's call them that.
A relative, and you were under their care.
Yes, I was 19.
Okay.
Very green about life. But also remember, given the fact that for a very long time as a family we were struggling, at some point they sort of,
so you
go through a number.
Stayed with that person.
After some time you stay with, So that was the sort of situation there was. And I remember trying to talk to the women, and you still get the same, you know. You have. I
It
remember
was just
someone. You know how I can be with people, and I remember another woman told me in church, told me, you know, there is something about you that draws, you know, married men or men to you, and it's a spirit of lust, so you need to pray against it. Then I started being, you know, taming myself a bit to see that I am not. So it's the way people that are religious look at, you know, sexual abuse and assault sort of contributed a bit to me saying, how about I try to just open up a space. Now, I must say, I'm still struggling with whether to register Amani or not, but I just want to make sure I do the work that I'm able to. So what I do is partner with already registered organizations so that rape victims know where to go to. They know what to do. For instance, if this happens to you, don't wash off. The first place I went to was the bathroom, and I spent close to 2 hours in there just washing it off. But you see, when you want to pursue legal, you know, legal action,
you have to go see
exactly.
go to the police, go to the police
Thank you.
surgeon.
Nowadays, at least I know you don't wash off. You go, or open up a case with police, go to a public hospital, get checked, keep that evidence, and then, you know, proceed, things like that. So part of why Amani for me exists is that, so that it's sort of like a first aid for me to also use the connects that I know, people that I know can be helpful. And so far, so good. Sometimes I've had to inject in my own money because, again, it's not registered, but working with other organizations like Frauen, Chapter 4, sometimes even FIDA, or, you know, all of those guys to sort of see how we can help rape victims, for me, sort of gives the pain I went through purpose, because from 19 to like 26, 27,
Wow.
I had no idea. But now I'm able to contextualize it and understand and
Was
also
not your
help
fault.
another person.
Someone took advantage of you.
Sometimes the most unsafe space is with people we know.
Yeah. Sadly.
Uncles,
They'll say, don't talk to strangers.
Don't. But that uncle you're
should
telling
never
me
be
to
alone
cover
with
up
a man.
lesu for, that uncle who continually calls you, your child, my wife, you know, jokingly.
Thank you.
That uncle that drinks and has no restraint, or that auntie, or that maid. These are the people we are trusted, like we are trusted with the most, or we trust the most, are usually the predators in waiting, sadly.
Sadly.
Sometimes even fathers. I mean, we saw it during the pandemic.
Yeah. Fathers, grandfathers.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I like that you talked about, you know, the victim blaming, because I think that's something we're still fighting, because it starts with you, the victim. You're like, what did I do wrong? How did I let this happen?
Yeah.
Or did I encourage this person? And then somehow it's reinforced by society where they're like, but what did you do? What were you wearing? You know, all these different things. And again, a lot of victims lose the sense of, I have been violated.
Yes. I brought this upon
And then you talk
myself.
about, like, you know, a religious community,
Yes.
your society around you saying, oh, there's something about you that made this happen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Glad I can talk about it without crying.
Come a long way. Yeah?
Oof, a very long way. A very, very long way, because you look at your personality. Sometimes I feared that I probably have like multiple personality disorder. To be honest, I don't want to diagnose myself, but because going through the things I've gone through, what Alex L calls the coping mechanisms, and trying to just be this one person, you know, and just make sure that the old ones die off. It's a struggle, because you imagine having to tone down because, oh, you know, married men or men are drawn to you, and then you become a shadow of yourself, and then, oh, you're being this. I've always really been told, you're doing too much, you're too loud, you're too opinionated, you're too this, you're too hyper, you're too jumpy, now you're too quiet. So when people meet me, because I'm an introvert that learned how to be extroverted, so when people find me quiet in my space, are you okay? Are you fine? I'm like, I'm okay. Mulunji is not talking.
But you can be an introvert and an extrovert.
Thank you.
At
So
different
when I
times.
found the word, ambivert, I was like, yes, we exist. We are real.
Oh my gosh. People always have an opinion on who you're supposed to be.
I'm telling you, here is the box fit into it. And I've always not been that person. I'll ask you why there is a box.
Exactly.
And why we're fitting in it.
Takes us back to when you were little
Like,
and all the
must I?
questions. The little, and your parents like, how child?
They're going to beat this one.
So when did you get into radio?
Radio. You know, like how we've now probably seen things from me fall in line. One of the issues I've struggled with is having a plan. Things never go according to my plans. Life says, hold my juice. We're not going to do that. So I loved radio and TV. There's a day when I was younger, my dad found me and screamed at TV.
You were that
And I
child.
remember
You
he
were
just
that
stopped
child.
and looked at me and shook his head. He was quite strict, by the way. And he just looked at me and said, "Got to go and sleep." And there were several other attempts. So growing up, would listen to BBC a lot. And then we listen to a lot of music. I remember when they were eulogizing Alex Ndaula, I'm like, man, that guy, we would listen to him all the time. Like there were times when he would get, very hyped, and then Daddy says, I think let's listen to something else.
When it's when it goes a little too.
I think we've had enough radio, TV for the day. I used to smuggle, sorry, Dad, if you watch this, but I used to smuggle radios into school to listen to the morning show, Power FM's morning show, with Ben, Rachel, and Enoch. And then I think Pablo at some point. So I was like, man, these guys sound like they're having such a good time. So I got to a Toto one day and I asked around and they were like, you go and do a voice test. I failed. I failed so bad.
Really? Maybe it was nerves though.
Let me tell you, it was so bad. Enoch told me, let's give it a few years. So I just went and nursed my L. There was a radio called University Radio. They would host me Bambi occasionally, so that's what gave me to go and try Power FM.
Okay, and then you're like, no.
Yeah, but they really knew how to turn us down gently. So 25, I joined Yugo Uganda as I was writing. My journalism then was you would write stories. That's when I even learned how to do content creation and all. So while I'm there, around heading into 26, Rachel Mwine calls me. Like I found missed calls from her. I'm like, oh my God, what has happened? Because she's like a big sister to me. So I call her back. I'm like, is everything okay? She's like, yeah, we want you to come into, come to Power. So I go in and they give me a script. I'm like, not again. I'm going to fail. I spent 1.5 hours in there because I was so nervous. And then later when I get called in and they're like, come through, come. We would like for you to join us. I'm like, eh? So as I tried to double with Yugo, but radio can be very demanding. So I unfortunately had to let Yugo Uganda go. And Power FM, I'm going to call you out, Becky. I remember it was Becky and Brian on the Drive Time show.
Okay.
So Power FM has this very interesting tradition. On this day, I'm doing radio training, and Becky's like, my stomach is paining. Let me come. But you can play a few things here and there. I'm like, okay, cool.
And she
Crystal, the mess.
she left you there.
We call it throwing in the deep end. Yo, I played intros, outros, fill-ins. It was a mess. Like, what has happened to that girl? As nervous, what? And then, you know how you open your mic and people think radio is talking? My mind was blank. Then you look at the screen, it's blank. You switch on the microphone. Then you remember, dead air. You're not supposed to have dead air. My God. And you're like, I swear I talk. I was so nervous. And then I had to replace her because she was moving on to the breakfast show. First 2 weeks, there were 3 listeners who would abuse me. They would abuse me. It actually gave me, I won't call it trauma, but as a radio host, I hate picking phone calls.
You don't want.
Whoa. Today you sound a bit better. Try listening to Becky Nantale. And now you have Becky Nantale's accent. Help me help you. Scarlett. And then they go, hi, Becky. Hey, she's not here. Ba, ba, ba.
Well, you know what? That's tough love.
No.
Oh my God.
Bullying at this point. Because I get as filling in the shoes of, have you listened to Becky? Becky is amazing.
I know.
And here I was.
The radio is just a tough market. It's like they have a very personal relationship with the host. So when someone comes in there, like,
Intruding.
who are you?
A homewrecker. Oh my
Oh my
God.
gosh, that's funny.
5 years in,
Why did you leave?
why did I leave? Crystal, why? To be honest, I felt it was time.
Okay.
Radio is amazing, but for someone like me who has the fear of poverty, sometimes you're like, oh, but maybe I just get a job that pays in like dollars. What? So I remember sitting down, and I was 29 then, and I'm like, I need to be more in charge of the next 10 years of my life. I didn't even know what that looked like because, like I've told you, I plan and God laughs. Okay. So I remember sitting down and I'm like, I have a friend, and every time I would like talk to them about whatever I thought was not going right or how tired I was, they kept on telling me, you're emotionally attached to this job, you need to leave.
Okay.
You need to leave, you need to leave. I'm like, but Gwe, you want me to leave and go where?
I
don't have a gamba no go. Stop. Help me help you here. So finally, I'm like, you know what? There's this thing that came to my mind, how, you can't keep on asking with your hands full. And it helped me make that decision. I didn't live on bad terms. I was just personally tired.
Okay.
I'd also reached a space in my faith where I probably still have questions, and most of them were not being answered. And I was just exploring a little more. And I love church and all, but sometimes life is not as black and white, Sometimes some people need more answers than just, quoted scripture. Or sometimes it's okay to say, man, Christo, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So a part of me also felt like I never really belonged.
You talked about, basically becoming a Christian and getting saved really young.
Yeah.
Really
At
young,
8.
before you even had a chance. Because normally our teen years, those formative years, you're kind of figuring out who you are and all of that. But sometimes when you're in, a closed community like that, you're not able to explore. So did you also feel like there were parts of yourself maybe that you hadn't?
Unfortunately not. Like, no. I didn't feel like I missed out on anything. I just felt like I was, what's that saying they say about being a square in a what?
In a round.
Yes, something. That's how I felt.
A square peg in a round
It
hole.
always felt like there is a mold and I'm supposed to fit in it. And again, going by Faith Mulungi, I'm going to ask you questions. So chances are I'm going to either look borderline disrespectful, but I just want to know.
Okay.
I just really want to know why, okay, you're telling me submit, but Paul says women should not speak. So what are we going with? Where are we going? And at some point it just was not
making sense.
Yeah, and even though I loved being on radio, there are times when I just want to tell people about it. Sometimes, guys, it doesn't get better. Sometimes we just, So I was just really in that space as an individual. And I realized that either I was just going to just rebel and rebel, or I just needed to. And then remember, I'm a feminist.
Yes.
And a lot of times this comes with you
wondering
questioning
how
the
you were
things
balancing
you believe.
that.
To be honest, you never balance it. You never balance it. There are things that you sit down and you realize, okay, we are still being blamed for Eve. Eve died I don't know how many years ago. I'm not her. I didn't come out of a rib. My mom birthed me. So can we talk about evolving and all? And so I felt like instead of being in a space where it's, especially with my faith, because I'm going to be very honest with you, I've not been in church for a very long time. Yet this is the most peaceful I've felt.
Oh, wow.
And if you're going to present on a Christian radio station, you at some point are going to ask people what someone they listen to. But here I am in my personal life, I can't take anything in because I'm either questioning you as a person. You're telling me do as, Jesus said. I don't know if it's Jesus who said it, do as I say or do as I do. Like, for me, there were just things that were not connecting. Yet I love God.
I get it.
So I decided to just take a step back and just
build this new relationship for yourself.
Funny how my relationship with God had never been phased, but I just needed to take myself out of the equation. That's the one.
Out of that
particular equation, from organized religion, from
that's what I was talking about.
Yes, organized religion. And at first I was scared because I'm like, now what's going to happen? But here I am. I've grown with God. Like I said,
because you said it's been peaceful.
Very peaceful. But also scary.
Okay.
Because you've grown up in church since you were 8. You're told how to be, how things should be. But then, because the funny story about me being a feminist, I'm a very spiritual person, and I dream a lot, and then I have premonition. So one of those days I had a dream when I was being transplanted from like a very fertile space to a very dry place. And I remember telling someone, I'm like, I've kept on having this dream continually. So at campus, I partly offered gender studies. Funny how the women were the ones telling us that radical feminism or all these other forms of feminism are bad, they're wicked.
Okay.
But okay, Kale, let's go and study. Those ones are the good ones because, you still know your place as a woman. So I was at that space where I'm like, this is comfortable, but there has to be more. Like, okay, can we push? How about? And on that journey is when I realized there was this word, and I must credit Twitter feminists because I knew the thing existed, but I considered myself a conservative feminist.
Okay.
And then comes the rise of these women pushing back, the patriarchy. What? I'm like, hey, aren't we taking it a little too far?
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's easier to feminist when you're single because then when your politics, you don't have like another person and a third person to thingy. So for me, it was that space where I'm like, God, I love you. There are things about the Bible. There are things about colonialism and slavery and all of these things that I have questions about. And I would want to understand where the religious person is coming from, the perspective. But I also know that you say, men, everyone was created in your image, and I'll go with that. And for me, that's sort of like the interception for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie that I balance it because feminism, even as, you claim you're a Christian, you're supposed to continually grow and question things. And I feel like feminism for me pushes that limit for me. Why do we do the things we do? What needs to be phased out? But the trick with religion is they tell you no. Jesus died for you on the cross, but you see, you're still paying.
Yes.
So the lines, right now where
like you said, the black and the white.
Yes.
And sometimes there's no explanation. Don't ask.
That's it. So you're
Take it
there.
or leave it.
Yeah, you're there like, but I can't. Why are you telling me women can't wear trousers? But men back in the day were the ones wearing skirts. What are you talking about?
Thank you.
What are you saying? Like all of those questions. Yeah. So I didn't want. I think I also got tired of trying to just become birth myself into tiny acceptable things.
Yeah.
Where I am now. If you don't like me, it's okay. I'm not money. Just leave me alone.
Yes.
So it's way more peaceful.
Well, I'm glad you have some peace.
Thank you.
I'm glad, and you're still growing, evolving.
Yes.
That is the journey of life. I mean, sometimes we change our minds, and then sometimes we come back full circle. That can happen too, right?
Yep.
So I remember us working together,
Yes.
and you told me, that was when you first told me you were having very painful periods. You have really bad periods. And, I'm a woman, I have periods too, the usual thing. I'm like, oh, okay. I was very confused. And then you told me, when you have your periods, that sometimes you were sick, you were down, you were completely out. And I remember thinking, because I remember there was a girl in school when I was in boarding school, and she would get a fever, and she would throw up, and she would be put on an IV for 3 days just because she had her period. So I remember that, and I was like, wow, okay, this might just be one of those situations.
Yeah.
But at the time, I don't think you knew exactly what your issue was.
Nope. So
Because I asked you, have you been to see doctors?
I remembered, and
You're
I'm like, I do painkillers.
Mm-hmm.
And in my head, I'm like, okay, let's have this conversation because I also don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a tomboy growing up, I used to play soccer. So I remember the first time my periods came, we had just scored and we were having fun. I remember I used to call it Kuba celebration. So apparently, I don't know whether they still do it in Buganda. When you get your periods, there is a ritual they
A ritual.
do to help determine how many days. Now, I think I talked a day later. So my mom was like, now what are we going to do? How are we going to determine? If you don't determine the days, they weren't as staunch, religious then.
Okay.
But then the pain just kept going and going. Like it would be so bad.
How old were you at this time?
12, 13, around there. It was so bad, and everyone around me would not experience the pain. So then comes the stereotype of Nami Ekozo. Yekoza. No, that one is she's just too soft. And this goes on and on and on.
I hate to say it, but as women, sometimes we make that mistake, but we all have periods.
And
I've had cramps before, but I still work. I still go on with my life.
We perpetuate harmful stereotypes as well because it makes us look different. I mean, you brave your periods, go, go, go. But also you remember we've been told the more pain we embody or the more pain we take in, it's the level of womanhood.
Yes, thank you.
So I maybe sometimes it's understandable. So later on, I'm able to get money. I get a gain. And I explain, I'm like, when these periods come, I freeze. I practically can't feel anything from up here down. I can't feel anything. I am cold. I have a metal-like taste in my mouth because I would not. I've always been a very self-aware person, sometimes even for the worst, because that would also, bring in insecurities. But I knew something was wrong. However, people would just say, these are periods, they happen. Of course, I didn't reach to the level where I would black out. But now, as the time went on, I remember last year, when was that? When did they open us up?
It was 2020?
Completely opening us up.
Oh, no, that's last year.
Yes. So in April, the peace come. Meanwhile, this whole time I have a gyne, but they were just telling me to give birth.
So you still didn't know you had endometriosis?
Let me tell you, they would check and everything would check out. The uterus was the right size. Everything was the right size. And so they would just tell me, here, a painkillers, go home. We did everything, Crystal.
Okay, so for people who don't know about this condition, what is it?
So endometriosis is a condition that happens. We bleed out the endometrial lining. So when the cells that are found in that lining grow outside or inside the uterus, they go through the same process the lining is supposed to go through. But remember, the lining is washed out. But these ones are stuck in a different space. So that means, in my case, the intestines are part of the ovaries. It can actually grow in the lungs. It can grow in the brain. It can go as up as it can.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So that place, wherever the cells have landed, they grow. And they tear. They cause pain. Plus, in my case, they caused what they call a frozen pelvis. So they were just bundling everything together and just pushing it down.
So that's why you felt like you could not move.
Like contractions. Like as the years advanced, the pain just got worse. So in April, we are in all these restrictions, and I honestly felt like I was going to die. So I called a friend of mine, Mishi. She was living in Chiwatule. I called her and I'm like, I am dying. If you don't come to take me to hospital, poor woman went through all this, just told the policeman, yeah, I'm going. So she picked me, took me to a hospital. I don't know if I should name and shame them. Took me there, and they looked at me and told her she aborted. She cannot she cannot be going through this. Like, Crystal, I practically felt like everything was just going to come out. And I remember them looking at me and ignoring me, which had been the treatment. Because everyone would wonder,
so everywhere
how
you would
do
go,
you?
they're
Yes.
like,
You're just weak. So they asked me to step on their, the scale to just go through, and I black out. And I fall down. Anyway, next thing I know, they've just put all these things on me. And that's when I was like, I know something is not right. Something is not okay. These would go on, the pills would go on sometimes a week, and they were heavy from start to finish. And then I would be very lightheaded. Like, then it had increased from the week before was hell. That's why when we were working together.
So like half a month you were...
Thank you. That's why when we were working together, I'm like, how do I explain? Because then I didn't even know what it was. Anyway, so I go through 8 whole... I remember the time they looked us up again, I had just done an MRI at Ruby.
Okay.
A friend of mine who works there looked at the thingies and told me, do you have a guy? And I'm like, yes. They're like, no, I think you need to get another. And you could tell from his face that...
He was like, how can they not catch this?
Yes. So I would get cysts, but they would have hemorrhagic cysts. That's what they call them.
Okay.
A normal cyst is not supposed to be painful. It's not supposed to have blood in
And
it.
it remains whole, and it can just...
And then it can just be washed away with the body. But the minute they start causing pain, something is going wrong. So anyway, long story short, 2 out of 8 gyns were able to tell me what you're describing is called endometriosis.
Wait, 2 out of 8?
Yes.
So one after the other, after the other, after the other.
Because the pain had just, like, it just would not stop. The pain was terrible, Crystal.
And you had gotten to a point where you needed surgery.
Exactly. No, like, we didn't even know that. So the MRI is when we are locked up.
Okay.
We get to the lockdown, but I'm like, am I going to handle? Anyway, so Pesh takes me in, so I get to start seeing a doctor, a very prominent doctor in Tinda, who was very honest with me. He told me the things we are detecting on here, the condition they are suggesting, I don't know so much about it, but we can learn. So the first they recognize is called adenomyosis. That's when the endometriosis cells grow in the uterus.
Okay.
In the muscle itself.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. And then endo now, because again, they would check down here. But remember, endometriosis grows outside the uterus. So anyway, long story short, I see another guy, a cousin of mine actually begged me, and she's like, I know you're tired, I know you're frustrated, but see, just this one doctor. I'm like, okay, I go to Alexandra. I walk in and this man tells me, you need surgery ASAP. Otherwise, we are going to lose you. Ironically, today is when I make Aya post-diagnosis.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So he tells me we're going to do, so turns out why endometriosis takes a long time. Outside the mindset, it cannot be detected on MRI. It can't be detected on all these other scans. I've done all those scans. It can only be detected through what they call a diagnostic laparoscopy.
So there's a specific test.
Yes.
And most people will not think about it because it's quite rare as well.
Funny how no.
Wait, what?
It's way more common than we think.
Oh my goodness.
It's just that, one, we've been accustomed to pain, but also by the time they usually diagnose it, it takes about 8 to 10 years. Now there are 4 stages, 1 to 4. I'm currently in 4. But
4 is...
Yes. But someone at 1 can actually be feeling way more pain than I am. And it affects us differently because remember, the cells grow wherever. So it's still a bit of a difficult condition to diagnose, but it's not as rare as we think. So we do the laparoscopy. It was very pricey. Thank you, my friends, for standing with me. It was so pricey. And the procedure is 1.5
has been.
Yes. It's supposed to be 1.5 hours. I spent 7.
Oh, wow.
7. And I am so thankful for life because I'm told that after the surgery, they were just there waiting for me to wake up. And then 2 weeks later, they were just waiting for me to not have fistula because they ended up, so practically you just attach a camera, the camera's in, and then they see. It's, sorry, chocolate lovers, but it looks chocolatey. So wherever it has landed, that's how you're able to detect it. That's how it evades all these other scans because you have to first look at it. Now, like I said, in my case, everything had just started being pushed down. So that meant they had to find a way, they call it lesions, to create lesions and all of that to first separate this ovary from the uterus, separate this ovary from the intestine, separate what, like, it was a lot. I watched the video afterwards and I was like, yo, I could have died in there. It was very risky. So I finally got the diagnosis. It's not curable. I love you, Christians, but when you come into my DMs and you're telling me how God heals, I don't doubt it. But sometimes it is what it is.
You have to live with it.
And also, oh, please don't go asking endo warriors, are you able to give birth? I don't know. I have no idea. There are some that are able to.
There's other things we do.
Let me, oh, are you able to have sex?
People asking you this question.
Let me tell you the minute. Oh my God, thank you so much for sharing your condition. Are you able to?
Google is your friend.
But even Google is just giving us. I feel like there are better ways we can inform ourselves about other people's conditions without being very intrusive.
That's what I mean. I mean, you can go watch YouTube videos
So I saw
and
there's one who
read
actually
different
came and
articles
said,
and all these things.
there's someone who came and said, so I saw infertility is one of the, won't that reduce your chances of getting married and having? Actually, hold whatever I'm drinking, because after the play, I talked about it because I chose to raise awareness. And I've been warned about how that reduces my desirability. But man, guys, I was born single. So a woman comes to me with all these good intentions. She's like, hi, I request to do something. I'm like, what? Next thing I know, Father, in the name of Jesus, we pray, we cast it down. Crystal. I think the whole time my face was like, yo, sis.
She was moved. She was truly moved.
Jehovah, you're the one who gives new organs. Like, is that an organ neither?
I love that you're handing the system.
You know, you feel
There's
violated.
nothing you can do but laugh,
First of all,
really.
I was like, I'm constantly in pain.
Yes.
It's just that I have chosen, if I survived that surgery.
That time, the surgery.
I had an accident in May, a couple of days before discussing my contract at Radio City. If I have gone through all those things and I'm still here, but dear, my joy is too expensive.
For someone to come and mess with it.
But the woman, I mean, I should just slap it. I'm like, madam.
And it's like, ow, 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 ow.
My girls were like, we could have just gotten you out of there. But yes, and there are other conditions. There are fibroids. There are cervical cancer, and you have babies, right? So I would definitely advise when your children, reach, let's say, teenage, let's introduce fertility doctors, and because man, they're different.
Yeah.
Fertility doctors are different from gynecologists. So let's not wait till people are getting married.
So you mean take them for a check,
Exactly.
just to make sure that everything is
routine
fine.
checks. If they complain of pain, I mean, don't first think we are lying, because I can't count the number of times. And I'm currently grateful for my employers now, because they understand that, man, to be honest, sometimes my doctors look at me and they're like, for the pain you're in, you're blasting. I mean,
You're living your life.
I went for Fit for Makers concert and Tiwa. They usually ask me, so where are we getting this? Because I also try to not depend on it entirely. But at times when they're like, where are we getting this one this time? I'm like, you see, Tiwa Savage is in town and I need to go. Please don't be like me. It's just that, I don't know. I feel like the diagnosis sort of helped me understand that life is so short.
Yeah.
Life is so short, and
I feel like it probably also gave you at least a sense of some kind of control. Because before it was like, something is wrong. Something's wrong, but you didn't know what it was.
I mean, you would see me 2 weeks of productivity, and then the other 2 weeks you're asking me things. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because it actually affects your mental health as well. There's a statistic that shows that women that live in endometriosis take their lives way much, because first of all, your moods are like this, but also the pain gets just rather difficult. So knowing what we are working with here sort of helps me. I'm not saying I know everything, because there are times when I'm just really overwhelmed. I am a very public but private person, so there are the battles that I've just been able to fight with just loved ones and friends. And I really, really am grateful for life.
Wow.
Yeah.
You are a miracle.
Yes. I actually think we should change my name to
To miracle.
Actually, Mulunji, miracle.
AKA miracle. Why not?
Yes.
Why not? No, that's a lot to go through.
It
I am
really is.
so glad that at least you have an idea of what's going on, because I think that's one of the hardest things, not knowing what is wrong.
And the money.
And then people don't believe. Thank you.
And
it's
the
been
money.
a very expensive
Still is,
journey.
because to stay
you said
managing
treatment
the pain
for the rest of your life, right?
Yes. Yes. And yeah, it's very crazy, but we're still here.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. We have laughed, we have giggled.
Right? We've not cried.
And no, we've not cried. Well, I felt a little, but I pushed it back.
But then my emotions were like, nope, we're not doing this. But thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
And for this
I love that
friendship.
you're living life with, with joy. You look for the humor, which is one of a coping mechanism, a healthy one.
Yes.
Yes, and for sharing, because you don't know how many other people you'll help along the way. Yeah,
Thank you.
love you.
Love you too.